fans, and welcome back to another edition of the Terry Collins Show, presented by Tunnel of Towers, supporting America's greatest heroes. Donate just $11 per month by going to t2t.org. That's T, the number 2, T.org. I'm John Arezzi, and back with us as we head into the final week of the regular season is the man who managed the New York Mets longer than anyone in their history, the last manager to lead them to the World Series 10 years ago. Let's welcome back Terry Collins. Terry, welcome back.
Thanks, John. It's good to be back. Good to be back on the air and talk a little bit about what's going on with the Mets these days.
Yeah, I'm sure that's going to be an interesting conversation that we will have a leadoff soon with Andy Martino. First, it was great seeing you at the Alumni Classic. How great was that?
Oh, it was a blast. It was so much fun. And again, I tip my hats to the Mets. Steve and Alex did a tremendous job, but all the other people behind the scenes, that do such a great job, step up and make it fun for the players that came back, and had great conversations with a lot of guys I haven't seen in a long time, and a lot of fun. It was a lot. I just hope that Turk Wendell and Rick Reed didn't get hurt too bad in the game, which always worries you. But I was shocked with what I saw. Johan Santana threw 82 miles an hour, and Harv was at, I think, 84, 85. So, it just shows you, that competitiveness never leaves. It never leaves your body.
No, it doesn't. And some of the guys look like they could absolutely play today. When you take a look at Curtis Granderson and how great he looks, and so many of the others, it really, and I understand why you don't call it an old timers game, because the shape that a lot of these guys were in, the alumni, and I think it's a much better phrase than old timers anyway, but, and Terry, just seeing what you were doing on the field and embracing guys that you haven't seen in a long time. And you look like you lit up Citi Field with the smile on your face. So it was just so wonderful to be a part of. And later today on the show, we have some highlights that will show everybody. So it'll be a great little time to discuss that Alumni Classic in more detail. And then later on in the show, we'll talk about a big event that you got coming up in New York City at the end of the week. So, but we have to get right to the leadoff, and this is kind of a leadoff that I'm like, we need to get our favorite insider on the show with us to talk about what's going on with the New York Mets. So why don't we bring on SNY TV baseball writer covering both the Mets and the Yankees, analyst for Baseball Night in New York, and an author as well. Let's say hello to our friend Andy Martino.
Hello, fellas. How we doing today?
Good, Andy. Good. Thanks for coming on again.
Of course. Lots to talk about.
We got a lot to talk about today, and I know that.
Mm-hmm. Well, guys, 6 games to go to the regular season, and as we taped it, for the first time all since April the 5th, the Mets are actually not controlling their own destiny and are out of a playoff spot because Cincinnati Reds has a tiebreaker with them. The only question I have to pose to both of you as we're watching what's been happening with this team, especially since June, is what happened? Andy, you go
That's
first.
The question. Oh boy, I'll try to be as concise as I can, John. But I'm still thinking about this. I'm certainly interested to hear what the former manager has to say here. But I would say, in a nutshell, the run prevention, which is the fancy new term for pitching and defense, they used to be what it was called. But combine those two things. Obviously, we've seen the Mets front office take a number of high risk, high reward risks on pitching acquisitions, whether it's Frankie Montas or trade deadline acquisitions, guys with really good stuff that just either been hurt or haven't performed over the course of the season. And then the defense has been pretty consistently poor, and really noticeably so over the past weekend against Washington. And I think that a David Stearns team, if you look at the Milwaukee Brewers, a couple of years down the line, the Mets are going to be really athletic, versatile, defensive club. That's the Stearns kind of approach. And he's inherited a lot of personnel that just don't fit that profile yet. So I think we're kind of in an in-between mode with the kind of team that he's going to build. And the defense has just been cost them. I think they'd be in solid playoff position right now with better defense over the course of the season. And then, of course, the inconsistency of some of the star hitters. So I'd say beyond all that, I would say certainly there isn't the chemistry, or as the younger people like to say, the vibes that there's been last year. But I don't think it's so bad that wouldn't improve with winning. Sometimes it's a chicken and egg thing, right? Chemistry and vibes. Certainly it hasn't been that way this year like it was in that OMG season. But if they were to go on a magical run, I guess you'd find chemistry through that. So that'd be my least important point, but still something to note.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. Number one, guys, clubhouse situations inside, behind the scenes, it's important, but it's not huge. I mean, we can go back years where, the Oakland A's were 3-time world champions with guys who fought every day in the clubhouse. So that's not an issue. The issue is to go out and play the game correctly. And as you've said, Andy, they're not, the pitching is different today. It's all, you got to have a big sweeper. And if you can't command the sweeper, then you're going to have problems, because guys that pump 100-mile-an-hour fastballs right down the middle is still going to get hit. Nobody tries to locate anything anymore. It's how hard can you throw it? And I believe me, and I'm an old time guy, and I will certainly stand up. But as the analytics people will tell you, they have numbers to back them up. Well, I have eyes to back me up. And I watched for 50 years the great pitchers who pitched in this game, who commanded the ball, were the best pitchers in the league, commanded the baseball. And on the offensive side, there were guys who handled the bat, who put the bat on the ball in big situations. And they did, home runs come. Home runs happen. And I get that. There are guys, that have great power who are going to hit 30, 40, 45, maybe 50 home runs. I get that. But there's also those same guys who can have a productive out. Hit a fly ball that moves a runner to third base, or hit a fly ball that is a sacrifice, or when the infield's back and they're giving you a run from third base early in the game, with one out, where they're still trying to hit the ball in the air, pop the ball up instead of just taking what the defense gives them. And that was what we used to be taught for years and years and years. And when I watch games, I don't see that. I see guys striking out. I see guys taking, fastballs in 2-strike counts. When you were always taught to hunt a fastball and then adjust to the off-speed stuff. Well, that doesn't exist anymore, because the numbers will dictate that there's more off-speed pitches being thrown than fastballs. So everybody gears up for a breaking ball, and those fastballs on the edges, or even on a majority of the plate, are being taken today. So, I go back and when I watch the games, I look at who plays the game right. There's a lot of games, and yes, I root for the Mets. No mistake about it. But I watch a lot of other games where I just watch the game itself to see who's playing it better, who plays the game better. And as you brought up the Milwaukee Brewers, I watched them play. Gosh, they hit cutoff men. They're tremendous on the bases. Man, they take extra bases. The Detroit Tigers all summer long, they were the talk of baseball about how many extra bases they took on a gap single that you better get it in, because they may take second. Well, now they're not even getting the gap singles, but they got to where they are today because of one phase of the game that sometimes goes unnoticed, and that's base running. Where the Mets, have had a great year stealing bases, tremendous year stealing bases, and I applaud them for doing that. But once in a while, a stinking 2-out single helps you win a game, and you don't have to hit a double. You don't have to hit a 2-run homer. So I have always talked about going back. If you have good players, Andy, John, if you have good players and they go and they execute the way the game is supposed to be played, you're going to come out on top, because they have the talent, and talent wins at our level.
Yep.
Yeah, it was hard. Go ahead, Andy. If you want to make a point, I'll jump in after.
No,
that.
I'm agreeing with you, and I'm just thinking about, you talk about stolen bases. There have been situations where certain Mets have been thrown out at third with no outs, trying to steal.
Can't have that
things like that. There have been guys not backing up bases lately. There's just been a lot of the little things that you're talking about that we've noticed in Mets games. And by the way, I don't really think that it's an indictment on the manager who knows these things and has attention to detail. And I don't think it's an indictment on the Mets necessarily. You mentioned a few teams, Terry, we both have, that play, quote unquote, the right way. But like you said, industry-wide, I think the way player development has gone. I mean, you should watch the Yankees this year. This is a team that might well end up in the World Series. And I guess it's a family podcast, so I'm not going to say where their heads have been hidden for most of the season. But I mean, the fundamental baseball's been atrocious. And that's not on Aaron Boone for the most part in that instance. I think the industry is developing players on specific skills, speed, velocity, launch angle and whatever, what have you, rather than like playing the full game. And I think that's what you're noticing, Terry, probably.
I agree. And, again, I watch guys, and, the other day I saw 2 guys strike out on balls right down the middle where they swung under the baseball. And again, because they're trying to get the ball in the air instead of just putting a good swing on it and making contact. And, as I was watching and I saw that thing, I said, when comes to pitching, everybody talks about all these pitchers will have a different angle for different pitches once in a while. He was dropping down a little bit more into that slider, or, oh, geez, he's right over the top. Well, you know what? Hitters, they can make adjustments too. I saw some of the best young hitters in the game, Jack Clark and Dave Parker, and a lot of guys came up. They swung down through the baseball. They created backspin. They didn't have to hit when they hit the ball in the air, it was going a long way. And now it's about if you miss a pitch underneath the baseball, okay, it may be up in the air, but sometimes fly balls are. We used to call them routine outs, where that bouncing ball, you'd be shocked at how many bouncing balls get through infields or cause cause infielders to make mistakes. So it's been tough, but I do believe this. I do believe they have a good enough team, and I think having today off, having Monday off. They're going to regroup. They got a tough schedule. They're going to Chicago. Andy, it's tough winning in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And then, so it's nice to be going in there. And, boy, if you can come out of there with 2 and then go in and you got to finish off with the Marlins. And again, as we've talked about, you got to beat the teams that aren't as good as you are. You got to beat them up this time of year.
Yeah, this weekend against Washington, the fundamentals were bad. Both teams, but the Mets look like they were
one of them is
playing...
supposed to be a last place team, and one of them is supposed to be a contender, right?
So well, that's exactly right. And who would have thought that the Nationals center fielder Jacob Young,
that was amazing,
made 2 incredible plays. That the first one I've never seen before, and I don't think anyone ever did. The ball, he catches it bounces out of his glove, it falls, he hits it like what do you call that? Hacky sack it back into his hand, and there's the out. And then the incredible catch, robbing Alvarez of a game-tying home run in the 9th inning. It seemed like the Nationals were playing like they were ready to go into a playoff situation rather than the Mets. The Mets looked tight, and their base running, their errors, Cedric Mullins not taking advantage of that unfortunate incident when the left fielder crashed into the wall and the ball went loose, and Terren scored, but he just stood there. And so there was so many other things. And then Lindor hits a line drive, which doubles off Mullins then. And so it was just kind of this frustrating thing. And you don't like to say snake bit a lot, but and even on the broadcast yesterday with Gary, and he said it seems like a team that's playing a little bit snake bit right now. And Terry, with all the teams that you've managed, can that enter the mindset of a team where it's like everything's going wrong? So, what do you do to even uplift their spirits after a loss like yesterday and a loss with the series that just took place?
And again, John, I thought about it yesterday when the game was over. And one thing, we go back to the old statement, hey, it's not over till it's over. Okay, so, maybe you had a crappy weekend. Well, guess what? Put it behind you and get ready for the next day. And the Nationals, they got nothing to lose. So they are playing a little looser. They can do some things that, that if they work, help you win a game. Where the Mets have to be very careful. They can't make mistakes right now, because they can't keep those mistakes that cost them games really hurt them right now. So there is a little different attitude wise, but you know what? You got, and I think Mendy does a tremendous job of keeping the same personality, the same mind frame every single day. And he's got it today or tomorrow when they get to the ballpark. Hey, let's just start today. Let's start our streak today. Let's go win 6 in a row, and we'll see what happens at the end of the 6 games. And there's no other way to do it, because they do have the talent. But go have some fun playing the game and play it the right way. And at the end of the day, if it's not good enough, it's not good enough.
You would agree, Andy?
Yeah, it's interesting. When the Texas Rangers were in town 2 weekends ago, someone from that club, whose opinion I trust, said the Mets are playing not to lose. And, the Rangers have since fallen off a little, but they were just young. All Seager and Simeon were hurt, and sort of similar to the Nationals. They were just playing free and easy because all the expectations are off for the year. And then they went on a little run. And it must be hard to play with no pressure when there actually is pressure. Like the Mets had no expectations last year. That was part of the fun.
No.
Yeah. But you can't have that, and especially as a New York team with a high payroll very often. So I guess you have to learn to play with that pressure, and that's obviously a harder thing to do. That part reminds me a little bit of the 22 Mets when they had won over 100 games in the regular season. And I was talking to Adam Ottavino, who was on that club when he was in with us with SNY, and we were just casually talking about it. And he said something like, there was probably something about once we got into September, you remember there was that Braves series that went sideways and then playing poorly against the Padres in the playoffs. And Ottavino said, the psychology of being the hunted and not the hunter probably got us a little bit. And I thought that was a good way to put it.
That's a great way to put it. But, and again, when you're on a good team and you're in the big leagues, guess what? Pressure comes with those being in those situations. Sure. And that's where, and to be honest, that's where the good players, we talk about it, and you and I have talked about it for a long time. The fear of failure. You cannot let that enter your head. The game is hard to play. You're going to strike out. You're going to make mistakes. It's human nature. The game is not easy to play. But you know what? When you're talented, you just got to go and can't worry about making a mistake. Go out and play the game hard. Go play, run the ball out, do all the things you're supposed to do. And you know what? If you catch a break or if a ball takes a bad hop or something, if you play the game right, again, talent wins at this level. And they have good talent. And that's why I'm saying I really think this next 6 days, I think they're going to step it up. But, I don't know who it is in the locker room that's, going to have the fun part. And, maybe they need to go find a singer and bring him back, let him sing, do the rap songs or whatever it is that gets you going again. But, I think they're going to be fine. It's just that, at this time of year, when you lose tough series like they just lost, boy, it can really come back to bite you.
What would be the MLB rule on adding Iglesias, but only after September 1st, but only for music? Are you allowed to add a musician to the roster?
I don't know. That could be a new rule. I know one thing. If Shohei Ohtani had to sing, they'd probably make a rule that he could come back and sing.
That's
I know that.
It'll be like the DH thing that they did for Ohtani a few years ago, right? Music only for Iglesias. Bring him back.
That's right.
Yeah, it was great to see him get such a warm reception when he was at the ball at Citi Field last week in the tribute video. But this season has been remarkable in the fact that the team has been extremely streaky to the point where I have a graphic that was posted. That if you could pull up that graphic on what the streaks of the Mets were this season. All right, let's take a look at this graphic, which it was revised for the last 5 games because now they're actually 4-3 now. But when you take a look at the first 69 games, obviously they were on a roll. It looked like it was going to be one of the most amazing seasons in franchise history. And then the next 17 games, 3-14, streaky again at 14-6. Just take a look at those numbers. I mean, that's kind of an incredible roller coaster pace for any team to be on with the expectations of making a World Series.
I don't know what to make of that. I'm going to leave this one to the former skipper. How does a season happen like this?
Yeah, Andy, we used to talk about it all the time. Winning streaks are great, but the one thing you got to stay away from are big losing streaks. If you lose 3 in a row, okay, pick it up and go win the next 3. But you start losing 8 and 10 in a row, they're tough. 10-game winning streaks are tough. So, you try to be as consistent as you can. That's why they tell you, you play, 700 ball at home and 500 ball on the road and you're in the playoffs. So, but those big losing streaks like at 2-14, those kind of things, boy, they're tough to make up in a major league season. And, you look at all of the little things that happen during those times and you come back. I used to sit back when the season was over and think about certain games where, maybe perhaps it was one of my decisions or perhaps something that happened that you said, that's what we can't have that happening. We have to fix that. But, and those are tremendous streaks, bad streaks as they were opening up with the way they played in the beginning of the season. So,
yeah.
But, it could be injuries. It could be all sorts of things. That's why the game's hard. And that's why, to be honest, it's a marathon. And you got to understand every team's going to go through those things. I mean, I sit back today and look at the team that was supposed to win 125 games, and they're fighting. They're going to fight their brains off now to keep from being a wild card. So so it's there's no givens in baseball.
No,
It has been a weird season that way. I think that's in slight fairness to the Mets. We should mention they're one of two teams possibly having an historic collapse. That's weird that them and the Tigers obviously to happen in the same season. All these winning. You mentioned the Dodgers, Terry. The Yankees and the Mets have had very similar seasons until the Yankees have finally found their stride at the right time. All these ups and downs have been league-wide. I have no idea if there's any trend that can explain this or if it's just random, but it's been a season of this. It's easy to hyper-focus on the team that we cover and talk about and you root for, John and Terry, but I guess for some reason that's been the league this year too.
I agree.
Very, very much so. It's but when you take a look at the Mets not being able to, only winning one road series this year when it comes down to the road trips, there's a lot of challenges they have coming up. And then when you talked about injuries, Terry, the Mets injuries on the pitching side of it have been incredible. The arm injuries, 46 different pitchers used, maybe 47, I don't know, but I think it broke a major league record for different pitchers used over the course of a season. Additionally, when you have Griffin Canning, Danielle Nunez, Drew Smith, Frankie Montas, and now possibly Tyler McGill and even possibly Reed Garrett.
Yeah, he looks like he needs
facing potential Tommy John. That is an incredible list of injuries, and then you combine that with Christian Scott, Max Kranick, AJ Minter, Danny Young, Drew Smith, and it doesn't even include those injuries that plague Sean Manaea, which are not arm related, and even Kodai Senga. How can any team have consistency when you have that type of turnaround on your starting and your relievers? So there's a pitching problem here with this organization and baseball wide, I think.
I agree.
Think it's more. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Andy. Go ahead. No,
I just probably going to say the same thing but we do agree on this that it is industry wide and it goes to the points Terry was making earlier in the show. Yeah. Not just spin and velocity and the emphasis on that, but also usage. Why are all these relievers dropping? Because they're having asked to give their teams 5 innings a game as a group. I think it seems pretty clear why. And teams, I think the Rays were a team that really started this about a decade ago, but it's kind of like use them up, wear them out, toss them out, get a new one. If you bring in a reliever, ask him to go max velo and spin for a year or two, then he needs elbow surgery. So that's kind of been the way it is in the industry. It's harsh, but I don't think it's a Mets thing.
I agree, Andy, but what you just said is exactly what's going on because it's all about power now and not pitching. It's throwing. It's just, you can throw as hard as you can and for as long as you can, we'll get somebody else in there. And that's what's happened. You used to be able to manage your bullpen. If you had a guy that gave you 3 innings tonight, you knew he might need 2 days off. So in one of those days, you were going to need a starting pitcher to give you that extra 6 outs maybe. It gets it maybe into the 7th inning. And, you took your beating, but now they just send him out, bring somebody else in, and it's a revolving door. And so you use a guy tonight for 1 inning. He's out because you're going to need somebody else because you're not getting linked out of your starters. You're not getting linked out of your starters because, again, it's all about making sure you try to keep them as healthy as you can. And I don't have the answers. I can just, from the outside looking in, I always go back and I'm very, very lucky to be around some of the great pitching instructors of the game who I talk to on a frequent basis, and they all go back to they just don't throw enough. And they're all being told these are X. You're only throwing X amount of pitches. And it used to be a time if you had a guy who threw 110 pitches, and you might say, I'm going to back him down to 95 this next start. Just to. And he sounds like it's still a lot today, but for them that was, hey, look, that's a shorter outing, and so you could always protect him. Now, you hope to get 5. And then, like you say, you're going to your bullpen every night for 4 2/3 or 4, and it takes a toll, man. That's why I feel terrible. I feel bad for the poor guys in those bullpens because they want to have big league time too, like all the starters. And, they're just up and down, up and down, up and down. And again, if they go out there and you talk about pressure, how would you like to get called up to the big leagues knowing you're going to pitch tonight And whether you pitch good or not, you're probably going to get sent down tomorrow. So,
Yeah.
so that's a little more pressure. Like, hey, I got to pitch pretty good tonight. Otherwise, I got to get in the car and head back to Syracuse. So, and I think that sometimes it kind of beats the mindset of those guys in that bullpen.
I agree with all that.
I mean, you look at what happened with Don Hamels. Like, he makes his major league debut with the Mets, and then they DFA him, and Baltimore picks him up. So
basically, it's gotten to the point where, and another one of this was Paul Blackburn a couple weeks ago. But there's a list goes on and on. If a guy saves this pitching staff by giving them a lot of length and pitching well, you can guarantee he'll be off the team the next day.
Correct.
It's an interesting result. I mean, that literally, because that's the way it works. It's like, oh, we can't use this guy for the next 2 days. DFA. That's the way it is now. Like, I remember
sounds
when
like there needs to be a rule change when it comes to that. It sounds like MLB needs to address that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not great for player health and player career service time, all these things. But it's like when Blackburn had that good outing that I'm thinking of, where he gave them some length and I can't remember exactly the whole situation, but that happened. And I remember some fans were like, "Oh, this is great. Blackburn's getting back on track. He's going to help." And I'm thinking, no, that was the last time he's ever going to pitch for the Mets because he was good. And sure enough, yeah.
Well, John, if you remember, they made a rule change a couple of years ago where they limited the number of pitchers you could carry.
Yes.
So they forced their hand. They forced going
in the other direction.
Yeah, you can only have this amount. So guess what? That means you got to ship guys out because you got to keep fresh guys in that bullpen because your bullpen's the key now because your starters don't go very far. And so they've created this mess themselves by changing some of the rules. Not that I think it's great to have 15 pitchers because you possibly can't. But if there's one way, because you look at how many teams, and nowadays it's pretty funny. With the DH in place now, I have never seen guys pinch hit so early in games as they are today. You make it, a pitcher goes 3 innings, you bring in a lefty to face a lefty, and they pinch hit for that guy in the 3rd inning. When and I'm thinking to myself, now you don't think that at the back end of this bullpen there's going to be some right-handed pitching that you might need that guy? But that's just the way the game is being played today, and it's, as Andy said, it is baseball wide. It's not just one team.
It's not just an organizational thing with the Mets. It is baseball wide. It's all teams. Right. It's happening everywhere, and it really is frustrating to watch this unfold in the way it is, especially with someone like you, Terry, that's been in the game all your life, and you've seen all these changes in evolution, and you must be like, what the heck is going on? It's crazy.
It is, John. It is.
It is. But let's say the Mets go on a roll this week, which everybody certainly hopes they will. And lo and behold, they make the postseason and they get in there. What do they need to do regarding that pitching staff and who's going to start? And what does that look like? Is it tag team? Is it their young kids? And then you talk, I'd like to get your opinions on that, but also, what do you do at center field during this postseason? Because that's been a glaring problem, I think, all season long. And then what do you do in the third base situation and who deserves to play? So I like to get both of your assessments on if they get in, what do you do?
You first, Skip.
Okay, well, if they get in, John, you have to, when you qualify, no matter what day it is, you immediately got to sit down and start figuring about your starting pitching. Okay. And by the way, you can't worry about it being a playoff. If your best pitcher is McLean and your second best pitcher is Tong, they're pitching. Yeah. They're pitching. You've got to be smart enough to analyze your pitching and say, not only that, maybe because of their time in the minor leagues and that their season was a little shorter and they do things differently, they might still have a number of innings left in them, where some of your major league guys who are the veteran guys who, they may be running a little low on fuel right now. So you just got to take a look and analyze your starting pitching. All right. In your set, when you talk about platoon situations, when you lived and died a season platooning in 2 or 3 different spots, that's what got you there. The minute you change it, the minute you say, well, okay, at third base, I'm going to go with Brett Baty against left-handed pitching, and because that's, he's the one who plays the best defense, and he's the one who's, he deserves to be in the lineup. Well, I'll tell you what, when he strikes out against some of those tough left-handers that you're going to face in the playoffs, that's your call. I mean, that's why accountability becomes huge. So I think you still got to go with how you got here, and what do they tell you? You got to dance with the girl that with the person that brung you to the day. That's what for me. That's how you got to approach it. And you know what? If you got to pinch hit in the middle of the game because it's a big situation, then you got to do that. But I don't think you can all of a sudden change the way you want to play the game in the playoffs.
Well, you're going to love what I'm about to tell you then, Terry, from what I'm hearing. That basically, let's say they make it. Let's say they make it in time to line up their pitching, and it's not fighting for it on the last day of the season. What I think they would lean toward doing, and these aren't my opinions, these are just sort of what I'm hearing from being around the team, you'd probably see Nolan McLean start game one, as he should, and then you probably would abandon the concept of a starting pitcher as we know it from there on in the series. And you could argue that fits sort of where the Mets are at, where they have a bunch of starting pitchers who are all either young or older and gassed, or like it doesn't. So the pieces are there, but it's tough to make them fit. So if you have a 3-game wildcard series, you'll maybe start, like they've been experimenting with it already with Holmes and Manaea with the piggyback. You might see more of that where Peterson becomes part of that or Sproat becomes part of that. They're comfortable with what they've seen from Sproat that he could pitch in the playoffs, start in the playoffs. But starting might mean opening. Starting might mean, one time through the order. So I think they're going to, once you get through a more traditional start with McLean in a game one, they would just almost go inning to inning with the rest of the staff for the rest of the series is probably the way they would go. Remember, when David Stearns was running the Brewers, they had a playoff game. I think it was an NLCS game against the Dodgers where Wade Miley was the starting pitcher. He threw to one batter, and then Brandon Woodruff came in the first inning. So I think we could see some hijinks like that for sure. So rather than trying to figure out what's the rotation as a reporter, I'm more thinking like, how are they going to mix and match for entire games? John, you brought up center field. I'll speak to that. I think this is a really interesting position because of Cedric Mullins being the trade deadline guy and not performing. So as we speak today, and by the time listeners hear this podcast, this might be resolved, but they're figuring out if Tyrone Taylor is healthy enough to be activated on Tuesday. And if he is, I don't think it's out of the question you could see Mullins designated for assignment or Jose Siri. You got to choose there. And theoretically, you could take Ronnie Mauricio off the roster and not have to make that decision right now, but you don't need to carry 3 center fielders, obviously.
No, I was going to say that. You don't need 3.
Right. So that's just an interesting call. Is it after all this trade deadline stuff and Mullins and everything, are you back to your best center field as a platoon between Taylor and Jeff McNeil? Maybe. And now's the time for just a gut check, like how do we win this week? Not who did we trade for, who did we acquire? I actually think Siri still gives you a lot of upside. He dropped the ball on Friday that got a lot of attention, but he made it to that ball. He's got a lot of range and he's got some power too. Mullins has shown nothing as a Met. So, Tyrone Taylor doesn't hit much, but he's a winning bench player. So there's just a lot of decisions to make here. But if McNeil's in center, now all of a sudden you have to maybe put Beatty at second and Vientos at third, which significantly weakens your infield defense. So there's a lot of different things to consider here. I'm glad they're not my decisions.
They're tough ones. They're tough decisions for sure. Finally, let's turn it around on the other side. If they don't, if by chance they don't get in and the season is over, first and foremost, they drew 3,182,057 fans this season. It was the largest attendance at Citi Field since they opened. Steve Cohen challenged the fans to show up, and they did in record numbers. But Cohen also put his money up. So he did what he had to do. He got Soto. He re-signed Alonso. Plus, with that luxury tax, it cost exponentially more. So Cohen did his part. The fans showed up. Citi Field had a party atmosphere for most of the season. It was an exciting place to be. And me as I do this podcast, right? But I also invest in the team. I'm a season ticket holder. I've had a 20-game plan. So, and I pay for the parking and I do all of that. And you leave a season if they don't get in there totally frustrated. Can you compare the Soul 7? You can in a way, but it was done differently. It was a different way to not get in. So what does the front office do at the end of the season if this team, as it's constructed, don't make it. I mean, what kind of changes can the fans see in 2026 if this goes south?
Well,
that's a big question.
That's a big question. So I want to preface this by saying I'm speaking completely speculatively here, just in different things you could
all
do.
Speculative.
I'm talking about how I've talked about earlier how Stearns wants better defense. So toward that end, you could see them moving on from Alonso and Vientos, right? Those aren't Milwaukee Brewers type defensive players. That's one thing. Obviously, one would be signing elsewhere in free agency. One could be a trade. Soto's not going anywhere for a long time, nor should he. No. Do you see if there's a trade market for Lindor? There's the Blue Jays could lose Bo Bichette, and that's the one owner with more money than Steve Cohen. Yeah. Again, total speculation. Just thinking, if you're thinking that you want to do something dramatic with this team because of what happened this year, that could be an option. You could also look at trading a Nimmo in a similar situation, but I think Lindor is probably more movable than Nimmo at this point in his career. But has Lindor given you his best seasons already? Everybody gets older. Would now be the time to build a team around Soto and the young pitching? I think these are probably all the questions that they would have to ask themselves, but it's not necessarily that they would do anything dramatic. They might just be able to say, we got a ton of pitching in the pipeline. We saw the future this year, and we're going to stay the course. I could see that too.
Yeah, they definitely want to build around pitching and those young arms that they've developed, and then when you look at what's in the minor leagues too, you got some really young prospects down there as well. So we hope that at the end of the season that things work out for the New York Mets. We hope that every single season. It's been a roller coaster ride this year, but you come back, and if it doesn't work out, you come back next year and you get excited again. So that's one thing about somebody like myself, who next year I'll celebrate 60 years as a Mets fan. So I was a young kid, but I'm always going to be there.
You've seen worse than this. That's for sure.
I've seen worse. Yeah, but that's the thing. You've seen worse than this, and you get excited and you appreciate, like last year, I appreciated it. They didn't make the World Series, but I was like, this was a great season.
Yeah, it was.
And this year is kind of like, you get your heart torn out of you. But then when the season is over, even though you're going to be like, you curse, you yell, you can't believe what you've just seen. But it's like, well, spring training is about 4 months from now, 3 months from now. So,
well, I think that's a great attitude as a fan.
You have to turn the page because it's in your DNA. Just as it is in Terry's body as a lifer in baseball, and you as a journalist in the game, no matter what happens, you love the game. You hope it's improved with tweaks, and you hope you don't see the disintegration of pitching over the next several years the way it's going now, but you always come back and you always have hope for 2026, regardless of what city you're in and regardless of what team that you root for. So yeah,
well said.
Yep, I agree with that, John. I think that they're very, very fortunate. They have some good young arms. I mean, I'm sitting here right today saying, my gosh, look what happened when we went with those young guys. They proved themselves that they were worthy of being there and could get the job done. Now that's good. It makes it a little easier to fill in other pieces and use some of the pieces you get to make some other spots better. So that's what for me, that's what the minor leagues are about. And I understand trying to keep the pay under control. I get all that stuff, but I spent a lot of years. I spent over 20 years in the minor leagues, and we knew one thing, and that was we were to get players major league ready, whether they were going to be Dodgers in our organization, or when I was with the Pirates, were they going to be Pirates? We had to get them to be big league players, because you never know what that big league team wants to do with one of these prospects that might get them a piece that gets you over the top. And that, for me, is what the game has always been about. And I understand, nobody wants to trade prospects. Well, guess what? The Hall of Fame is filled with a lot of guys who were prospects who got traded because their move helped their team get to the World Series. The ultimate goal was what you want to do. And, the Bagwells and the Smoltzes and those guys, they all got traded to make their other team, so that their team could get a piece at the time to help them when they were a young minor league player. Okay, yeah, you tip your hat to them that they became Hall of Famers. But you know what? Winning at the big league is hard. And to sit here today and say, well, if we do this, we'll win in 4 years. You cannot say that. That is absolutely impossible. If you got a chance to win now, you better win now, because you can't look down the road and say, oh, in 4 years, we're going to be really good.
Yeah, that's the way to look at it. And well, guys, I really appreciate Andy you coming on, and I'd like you to let everybody know where they can find you on social media. And I guess the book you're working on right now about the Mets and the Cohen era.
Don't remind me.
I mean, that's going to be an interesting book.
We'll just see what the next week means for that project. That's the plan. Let's see what happens this next week. You know what I'm saying? A lot of things riding on this season. In all seriousness, the premise of the book, which I strongly believe, is that the Mets are in good shape now, set up for the future. But we'll certainly might want to evaluate whether people will be in the mood to read that right away, or whether, if depending on how this year ends. But 2026 is the plan as of now, John.
Okay, awesome, Andy. As always, a pleasure to have you here with us on the Terry Collins Show.
Thanks, Andy. Good to see you,
guys. Of course.
We'll
see you guys
soon.
later. Yep.
Right.
Always great to have Andy Martino on with us, Terry. And it was really an honest and frank discussion analyzing what happened this season. But Andy's always a pleasure to have on the show.
Yeah, he's a sharp guy, John. He's on top of stuff, and he's, as I've told you before, he has a way about him where, when you're a manager, whether you're Aaron Boone or Carlos Mendoza, you feel free to talk to the guy, because you know that if you say, hey, look, I don't want this in paper, it's not getting in the paper with him.
Right.
And so that makes it easy, and that's why he has information other guys don't get, because they know he's honorable.
Yeah, it's always great, because he's really a true insider, and the fact that he's even doing a book about the Mets and the Cohen era, the cooperation that he's getting, so yeah, he's a well-respected man, and great to have him here on the show. We also invited Howie Rose on to be with us to talk about the Alumni Classic, and also talk about how great the 2015 postseason was for the New York Mets. And our discussions actually turned to what's going on with the Mets today. So Howie graciously agreed to talking about the team and what was going on with this 2025 version of the New York Mets. So we have a very special talking with TC now, with Howie Rose and our own Terry Collins. On this Talking with TC, we welcome back the radio voice of the New York Mets and member of their Hall of Fame, Howie Rose. Good to have you back, Howie.
Great to be back. Great to see you, TC. Great to see you, John.
Well, thanks, Howie, for coming on. I know we caught you in the middle of a tough stretch here, but I guess I want to start out by saying my biggest question is, you've been doing this a long time, and how does this last month and actually 6 weeks compare to what you've seen in the past?
Well, it's been unique in the sense that they got off to such a great start, and then you go back to the middle of June when there were 21 games under 500, 21 games over 500, and I think there's 17 under 500 now since around the 13th of June. I mean, that is a drastic turnaround. To say that anyone could have seen it coming to this extent would be wrong, but there were some signs that they might not be able to sustain some things that were making them as successful as they were early on, and to me that revolved around the starting pitching and the strain that they were putting on the bullpen because of too many short starts.
Howie, I've watched a lot of games, and I totally agree with you. We had a discussion earlier about, the fact that, and I understand, believe me, I don't agree with it, but I understand the analytical side of things about, the third time through the lineup and all that stuff. But man, if what they've done with that bullpen, and the starting pitching, I mean, we're looking at guys getting hurt, throwing 70 pitches a game, they're getting hurt. So I don't know if they're getting in shape enough to go out there and start quality major league games, but certainly that the changes in the bullpen, the number of guys they've used up and down, and they've got to have constantly every night. They seem like that they need a new guy because somebody last night pitched 2 innings, and it's been a roller coaster of a ride for me watching it. And it's been really tough for me to understand it.
You know, Terry, I go back to something that you used to say when you were managing the Mets about the proliferation of injuries with pitchers, starters, or relievers. Doesn't really matter. That I think you said you had actually talked to Dr. Job, or you'd heard Dr. Job say, look, we could take all these precautions, but if they're going to break, they're going to break. And it just seems that no matter what you do to try to protect them, they still break. And they know a lot more now than they used to. And it's not that they're breaking down at the major league level. It starts way before that, playing year round, everything's max effort. You've probably had these conversations ad infinitum. But, you know, for all these precautions, it just doesn't seem to make a difference.
Yeah, you know how, and again, I go back. Of course, I go back a long way. So I used to see how pitchers were trained, 35 years ago, and before all these injuries really started to crop up, and it was all about just the command of your pitches. It wasn't about how hard you threw them; it was about the command of them all. And so, those guys, I'm sure some of them got hurt now and then, but not to the extent they have now, to where everything's a surgery today, where a shoulder's a problem. He's got to operate. Tommy John's. I mean, it's crazy, and I think a lot of that's due to the unbelievable stress on the pitching arm, because they're trying to throw so hard instead of just trying to command the fastballs. Earlier in the show, I talked to Andy Martino about I can't believe how many fastball strikes I see taken today. Late, deep into account, where years ago, you hunted the fastball. And now these guys look at fastballs because, the percentages tell you, due to analytics, that there's more breaking balls being thrown. So they're hunting breaking balls. And I'll tell you what, for me, I don't know how you keep track of who's on the pitching staff and who isn't.
It's been unbelievable how many moves the Mets have made to get a reliever up here. The kid throws 3 or 4 innings to pick up for a bad start, and you know when he's on his 3rd inning of work that, well, sorry, son, you'll be going to Syracuse tomorrow. Great job, but enjoy Syracuse, because that's just the way it goes now. If a pitcher comes out of the bullpen and gives you 3 or 4 innings, he's of no use to you, based on the way they're handled today, for another 3 or 4 days. So why keep him around? It's just taking up a spot. Get another fresh arm up here, and it's kind of like lather, rinse, repeat. It just keeps
Right.
keeps recurring.
You know what, Howie? I know you're around these guys. I know you're around these guys a lot. Do you sense some confidence, or do you sense a sense of panic in being around them?
It's very interesting you say that, because no, I don't sense panic, and maybe that's part of the issue, because I think this is a pretty laid back kind of team that genuinely seem to like each other. I haven't heard of any grumbling about the manager. I haven't heard of any internal squabbles between players. I mean, they seem pretty even keeled. Maybe that's an issue. I don't know. Maybe I'm showing my age by saying perhaps it wouldn't be a bad thing for somebody to, yell, scream, turn over a buffet table. They don't do that stuff anymore for the most part. But, that kind of perceived animation, I don't think has been there. They care. They know what's going on. But maybe they need a jolt of something that probably doesn't exist on a personality level within that room.
Yeah, you could be right. So, John, what do you got for Howie?
Yeah, to touch on that, 47 pitches were used so far this season, breaking a major league record. So that is certainly something that we've never seen before. So
it's unfathomable.
It's unfathomable is correct. And these guys, they come in, they get either sent back down to Syracuse or DFA. Don Howell made his debut, and then he gets DFA'd, and Baltimore picks him up. So it's
At least he got picked up. A lot of these guys, they don't get picked up, and then they sign or they agree to be outrighted to AAA, and then they have to find their way back onto the 40-man. So it's just this crazy cycle.
Yeah, it is. It has been. But there's obviously been some good this season, as we can all attest to. The addition of Juan Soto, for one, was the biggest signing in baseball. And Soto has put up Soto-like numbers after a kind of a fairly slow start, catching fire in June. What is it like for you to now see Soto on a day-to-day basis, the work ethic? What's impressed you most about Juan Soto as a Met this year?
That there's no change in his personality, regardless of how up or down he's been. Because, what's really kind of confusing is that when the Mets were going at their best this year, all the talk in New York was, when's Juan Soto going to get going? Is Juan Soto comfortable with the Mets? Does Juan Soto regret leaving the Yankees? All that stuff. It was just conjecture anyway. But it's interesting that the Mets got to, I think, 21 games over 500 or whatever it was, without Soto being anything close to what he's been lately. But what he's
Yeah.
been over the last 6 or 8 weeks is otherworldly. And, again, the kid's 26 years old. So, the signs are in place that this is going to be the norm rather than the exception. And, if that's the case, it should bode well for the Mets. But there are so many other things that have unraveled along with, the period of time during which Soto has really taken off, that it becomes a very complicated issue. But it hasn't been on his shoulders, that's for sure.
No, and Pete has had a great season, clutch hitting. It's just been a great season for Pete. So the Mets have to make a big decision at the end of the season and into the off season because for me, watching Pete Alonso, I hope that he remains in New York for a very long time, and I hope they bring him back. I hope they can work it out because he's such a major part of the team. But getting back to pitching, the Mets of the past were always built on a strong starting pitching foundation from the days of Seaver, Kuzman, to Doc and Ronnie and Sid Fernandez of the 80s. And Terry's teams, DeGrom, Harvey, Noah Syndergaard, it was always built on these young arms.
Wheeler, Matt, yeah.
All of them. Yeah, I know I'm leaving a lot of them out because there's so many, and that was kind of the core, and that's what the Mets relied on for so many eras. Late this season, we got a taste of what could be the beginning of another core of young pitchers emerging. Nolan McLean, Brandon Sprout, Jonah Tong all made their debuts very late in the season. And this is a question impressions of this trio, and could this be another emerging core that helps the franchise into 2026 and beyond?
Well, I've stopped going there as far as expectations. And the reason for that, and, I know Terry to this day has trouble believing that it actually unfolded this way. But those five guys we mentioned, Harvey, DeGrom, Syndergaard, Matz, Wheeler, do you know they made a grand total of one healthy turn through the rotation? And that was it. Because to a man, they went down. They all had Tommy John. So I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, these three kids, McLean and Tong and Sprout, they're the next coming, because you don't know what's around the corner. What I like, in a sense, is that they did not come up with a great deal of fanfare, meaning that we weren't sort of tracking every one of any or all three of their starts from the beginning of this year, salivating at the thought they'd be up with a big league club at some point this season. I wouldn't say they sneaked up on anybody, but they did not have the same level of anticipation that the five guys that Terry had, or that, what we call them, Generation K 30 years ago with Wilson, Pulsifer, and Isringhausen. And of course, they all broke down. So I'm a little squeamish about building expectations, knowing what might be around the corner. But I think it is telling and informative that with the difficulties the Mets have had with their starting pitchers over the second half of the year, that, whatever happens this last week of the season, all three of those kids are going to have a significant role in where they ultimately go.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what Howie has said. I mean, I said it earlier. I think the Mets are going to get in. I really do. So I think you've got, when you sit down here with David Stearns and Carlos, and they're sitting here trying to decide how they're going to approach postseason. You got to, as you look at whoever the names are on this list of pitchers, I mean, those kids got to be at the top of the way they've pitched right now. They're not tired. They've got energy up the, because they're young and they're in the big leagues for the first time. Their energy is flowing great. And right now, when you look at the outings in the last and I know David Peterson's had a tremendous year, although he struggled his last couple of outings maybe, but these guys got to figure in the puzzle when it comes to postseason, whether it's starting or relieving. But how can you leave these guys out of the mix when all season long, you've run into pitching problems, and these are three young guys who are healthy and ready to go. I think they got to be a big part of it.
They have to be. And if I can, Terry, I want to pick your brain about something. And I think we talked about it a little bit during the Alumni Classic Day when I'd mentioned that in '07, when the Mets were going through their epic collapse in the last couple of weeks of the season, I remember the Cardinals were in for a one-game makeup. And I went into Tony La Russa's office and I asked him because the Cardinals went through something similar in '06 where it seemed like it was getting off the rails and they managed to get straightened out just in a nick of time. They went on to win the World Series, and he gave me his opinions about how to prevent it from coming completely undone. But from your perspective, as a manager, when you're in a situation like this, what can you do to kind of steer it back on track and keep it from completely falling apart?
You know how I've always believed, in the talent. I've always believed in talent. I think talent's what wins. So I think you've got to spend the majority of your time making sure that these guys understand. Hey, look, you guys belong here. You've earned the right to be here. Now just go. Let's go play. You guys have got to go play the game. And I think that this team is a perfect example of it. Okay, they haven't played very good in the last week. Well, you got to put that aside. You all know how to play. You all know how to play better. So let's just go out and let's focus on pitch to pitch, inning to inning, and execute the game the way we've all been taught to play it. And I think at the end, if you're talented enough and you execute all the fundamentals of the game better than the other team, you're going to win.
Can you tell when a team starts to lose its belief in itself? And at that point, is there anything you can do apart from what you just said?
How you can sense it. You can sense it in the clubhouse. You can sense it in the dugout. All of a sudden, there's not as much noise. There's not as much, you can feel doubt. I used to go walk around and talk to players before every game, and I'd walk around the field during batting practice. And all of a sudden you hear someone say, geez, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm not seeing the ball good, or I'm not doing this. And all of a sudden you said, I got to fix this. This has to be changed because I got to get it back on the track. And I remember telling one guy, I said, well, he said, I'm killing us. I'm not playing very well. I said, look, in the whole world, there's 1% of the population who plays this game. And you're at the top of that 1%. You're a great player. And you know what? Everybody goes through slumps in the game. It's about how to get out of slumps that make the difference. And so I said, quit feeling sorry for yourself, because everybody goes through them, and start realizing how good you can actually be, and focus on what it's going to take to get better. Not, oh my gosh, I'm hurting the team. Hey, look, how am I going to help the team? And so I think there's some positive ways to go through some of this stuff. And I know Carlos has used some of it, and he's got some veteran players. I was talking about some young players that I had back then, but that's where the veteran leadership of this club now has got to step up. They've got to step up and take the bull by the horns and direct this team down the path. Hey, look, what it takes to be successful. Because there's a lot of guys in this team that have won in other, maybe not just with the Mets, but other places. So I think those guys you got to start leaning on right now.
One of the most special days of the season was the Alumni Classic weekend. I was fortunate enough to be there on the field and had such a wonderful time. I'd like to get your take, Howie, on the weekend and the Mets ownership embracing their history this way by bringing back past players and managers that mean so much to the fan base.
Well, I just love it so much. And to me, you can't do enough of it because baseball and really all sports, but there's just something unique about baseball. It creates a continuum. It creates a bond between parent and child. It used to be, you'd say father and son, but there are so many women at the game now, and just as capable or just as easily could be a mother and daughter bonding over baseball as it was a father and son. It's just the broad appeal of this game. And so when you're able to connect generations by bringing those players back, I remember the first baseball game I even remember going to was with my dad at an old timers day at Yankee Stadium in 1961. I'm 7 years old, and I got such a kick out of how quickly my father was able to identify the player who was in the midst of being introduced by Mel Allen. Mel would start to say, well, this guy in 1942, he did, and my father would say, Bobby Brown or whatever. And I just, it made me somewhat in awe of my dad, number one, which is also what baseball enables you to do. But it's so special. And so to see the guys, all of the guys who were back for the alumni weekend or the alumni day anyway, I guess it just means I'm old now, but I broadcast all of their games with the Mets. None of those guys predated me. So, it was great for me to see a bunch of guys that I would consider friends and enjoyed being around and kind of reconnecting. So to me, you just can't do enough of that.
And they look so good, a lot of the guys, and I'm glad they're calling it alumni. I was talking with Terry in an earlier segment we did with and Andy. I'm like, Curtis Granderson looks like he could go out there and play today, and so many of them did. But the highlight for you personally, was it seeing a player that you may not have seen in several years? Was it seeing TC suit up again and co-manage Team City Field? What was your favorite moment of that day?
I don't think there was one thing I can point to. It's always great seeing Terry, and I've been blessed to broadcast a couple of games with him. And, we see each other a few times a year. The same with a lot of the guys who live in the area and find their way to the ballpark. But I can't really point to one particular player or anything that happened in the game or the introductions. I got a kick, as I always do, out of seeing Turk Wendell, if I was going to, kind of mention one guy, because nowadays, and we were talking about the usage of relievers before, in 1998, when the Mets were pushing for the wild card, there was only one wild card in the National League and American League back then, but the Mets were in contention for the wild card down the stretch. Turk Wendell, you ready for this, TC? Turk Wendell pitched in 8 straight games, and he pitched effectively. And Turk's a character anyway, and he's a fun guy to be around. But it just seeing Turk go out there, it made me think about the way pitching is managed today, and I just had to laugh internally and think, I'm looking at Turk Wendell, and what must he think when a guy like Edwin Diaz the other day throws 7 pitches, but can't use him the next day because he got up twice the day before he threw the 7 pitches. And I understand you're trying to preserve these guys, but tell that to Turk. 8 straight days throwing slider after slider after slider and getting big hitter after big hitter out and helping almost single-handedly keep the Mets in the race. That's the part about how the game's changed I'll never embrace. But that's what made that alumni day so much fun. So, yeah, I'll pick out Turk.
Yeah. Well, the smiles that were on everybody's faces, and Terry was beaming. We captured video of him, and he just had a wonderful time. And the other guy that really looked like he was having the time of his life was Jay Horowitz.
Well,
and he had so much going on, but it was like to see Jay on that field with all of these guys that love him so much. It was kind of a tribute to him too, because I know he had, a lot in bringing all of these 40 plus players together. So I think we all need to tip our hats off to Jay.
Yeah,
Terry, you'll agree with this. Jay was just happy everybody showed up because he was
absolutely. I know he was nervous about it too, because I talked to him a couple of times during the week. I said, "Is there any no-shows?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, so and so is not going to be able to be here, but we're still going to be okay." And of course, the big thing was not anybody getting hurt. And who goes down? Turk goes down. Rick Reed goes down. So Bobby, you said I got 9 pitchers, ran out of pitching. So it's just what it was. But how it goes back to exactly what you said. I got to reconnect with some guys I haven't seen in a while, and I got to have some nice conversations with some people. I'll tell you, one of the great conversations I think you had him too was Jake DeGrom. I mean, he came out before the game. I mean, holy cow! And I spent 30 minutes talking to Jake, and I mean, that's what the game is. And that's what the game's always been about for me. It's always been about the players, and and every coach and every manager thinks they have something to do with the success of every one of their players if they're to get to the big leagues or they're big league stars. Whether we do or not, it kind of comes. Well, I can't tell you how many times. If somebody said, "Who are some of the best players you ever managed?" I've managed 5 Hall of Famers. I had nothing to do with them being Hall of Famers, but I had them all. So, and that's what this was kind of thing. And I'm sitting there, around the batting cage, and Piazza comes over and whacks me and said, "Hey, how you doing?" We have a conversation and stuff, and you can't trade that stuff, man. Not when you spent our life like you and I have, Howie, in the game. You can't trade that for anything.
Absolutely. And you know what? It's about rooting, as Jerry Seinfeld says, for the uniform, whichever team it is that you root for. But, when you're blessed to make your living within the game, as we've been for so long, it's about the people. Sure, you want whichever team you either root for or work for to win, but it transcends whether you win or lose when you establish relationships that snap back right into place, even if you haven't seen that particular person for 10, 20, 30 years.
That's right.
And that's what's so great about the game,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think the added bonus was DeGrom coming out
Yeah.
and guys who were like hadn't seen him in a long time, and it was really just warming the heart to see his ex-teammates there and him maybe seeing each other for the first time in so long. So it was a wonderful day. I hope the Mets continue that tradition because it was just a fabulous event, and I think the fans look forward to it as well. And speaking of cool events, this week, September the 28th, is upon us. You're heading back to New York, and it will be a big week for you. And this time, for the second consecutive year, you'll be in the Tunnel to Towers 5K run walk through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel in Lower Manhattan. What made last year's race so special to you, and what makes you want to participate again this year?
Well, first of all, John, when I got involved with Tunnel to Towers through you, when I first got involved and found out what the foundation was about and what they did, and then to get to meet Frank Siller and listen, hear his energy and all things he has done. And then when I got to the race that morning, they take the bus over and you get out, and I'm standing up at this area that was blocked off for the celebrity kind of people. And I saw 2,500 West Point cadets come running by, and the roar and the cheers they got, and they lined the tunnel to go down. And when that race started, there's different shifts of it all. And I mean, there's no way you can be tired. You couldn't be tired. You got through the tunnel. We got through the Battery Tunnel into Manhattan, and it was lined with firemen and policemen and soldiers and students. And I said, this is what all of this means. This is through Frank Siller. People are not going to forget what happened on 9/11 in 2001. They're not going to forget about it. This guy, he's going to continue to make it something and make it important, and just to be a part of it. And it was tremendous, and that's why I told him, I said, listen, I'll run next year. I probably won't be able to run it as fast as I did last year, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway.
Well, it's going to be something that everyone's going to look forward to. It's really one of the most talked about 5K races in the country. It's Sunday, September 28th, as I mentioned, Tunnel to Towers. They hold their 24th annual run walk through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, and participants will see banners with the names and faces of the 343 FDNY firefighters killed on 9/11. It's an unforgettable experience. And then they also, like last year, Terry, they do a concert. This year, they got country music superstar Chris Jansen. And for more information on this entire race, t2t.org is the place to go. And Terry, good luck this week.
Who's the concert supposed to be on Saturday night? There's a concert on Saturday night too.
Oh, we could find out. So what you get?
And the other thing,
I'm getting in town a few days before.
I'm bringing a buddy of mine who is a retired NYPD guy. His name's Juan Garibaldi, who's got into running, and I've talked to him. He said, "Man, I'd love to be able to get in that race." So I'm bringing Juan to run with me, and I told him, "You don't have to run with me. Just if you want to get in the race, if you want to take off, take off. I don't care." But he's excited. He's so excited about doing the race. It's very cool.
Well, we'll make sure we'll get you scheduled and what's happening on Saturday, because I know you're getting there a few days earlier. So best of luck on this Sunday, Terry.
Thanks.
And I know it's something that you have a passion for, and I know the foundation appreciates it as well. I know Terry had such a great time last year at the 5K run, and this year should be just as much fun for him. So we wish him the best. But it's also just one of dozens of Tunnel to Towers run walks this fall around the New York area. Across the country, you could find a T2T 5K. From the Jersey Shore to Bridgeport, Connecticut, to North Idaho, to Huntington Beach, California, and places in between, you could look for a foundation event near you. Check out the calendar at t2t.org. And if you're a hockey fan, heads up. Tunnel of Towers is hosting its Heroes Cup hockey tournament on October 18th. Teams from the FDNY, NYPD, Port Authority, police, Coast Guard, and other law enforcement agencies will be mixing it up in a spirited game at the Ice Vault Arena in Wayne, New Jersey. There's a great atmosphere of competition and brotherhood. Proceeds from the event go to Tunnel of Towers. For more information, go to t2t.org. That's T, the number 2t.org. And we will be back with Terry Collins and talk about the great Alumni Classic from just a couple of weeks ago with TC, right after this word from Tunnel to Towers.
My name is Lisa Tuzzolo. I am the wife of NYPD Sergeant Paul Tuzzolo, who was killed in the line of duty on November 4th, 2016. I think there are many reasons why it's important to give back to Tunnel to Towers. They've given me financial support to move forward and the ability to be home with my children and not worry about how the next bill is going to be paid. Tunnel to Towers. Let us do good.
Let's get back to the Alumni Classic. And as we mentioned in the opening of the show, it was such an amazing event. I was fortunate enough to be there and captured some video on the field and just to see how great it was. And Marsh, our creative director, as he did with the David Wright retirement ceremony and Hall of Fame induction, has put together a music clip of some of the highlights of the Alumni Classic, Terry, which I wanted to share with you so we could kind of relive what happened at Citi Field just a couple of weeks ago.
All right.
It's great to see those guys. How did it feel getting together with Jake again, even though he wasn't participating in Alumni Classic, but how it was seeing Jacob deGrom?
It was great to see Jake, and I had great conversation with him, and he's doing wonderful, and he deserves it, and had some really nice things to say about his time when he was with the Mets, and he's one of my favorite people I'll ever have had and be around, and I'm really, really happy for him. But it was a whole tremendous weekend. From start to finish, John.
Yeah, and it was a great game. And then, of course, everybody knows that, in 2016, you had that big confrontation with Mr. Hallion. So, and almost like a pro wrestling gimmick style, you were kind of coaxed into reliving that. And we do have a short little clip of that. So I do have some questions on the other side. So let's take a look at that right now.
To get the Mets within a game of the playoffs. And now Terry Collins is getting upset with the umpires. And now Terry has been ejected. I guess the umpire must have been in the jackpot.
The fans got a kick out of it, but did you? What'd you think of the glasses and everything else they had?
They when they said, "Hey, look, we want you and Bobby to get kicked out of the games." Bobby, of course, they wanted him to come back with the mustache and the disguise, and they said, "We want you to go out there and just say, you got to give us somehow." And they said, "You can either wear this big vest with a camera and a microphone on it, or you can wear these glasses because they have a camera and a microphone." And I said, "Just give me the glasses. I'm not wearing that big vest out there." So that's how it was. And of course, the umpires were great. We talked about it before the game, and that's why, to be honest, when I brought Santana in the game and the guy got on first base, I said to Johan, "Hey, just throw over to pick him off so I can have something to argue about."
Yeah,
because that's the only way. Because they wanted me to argue with the first base umpire because that's where Tom Hallion was during the real argument. So he threw over to first base anyway, and so it all started. But
they did the same thing with Bobby too. They did the same thing with Bobby. They got him injected, and then he comes out with one of those fake noses, and in disguise. So it was kind of funny to see both of you guys that really, especially Bobby. He had the mustache and the glasses back in the day, and he comes out with his big nose. But it was fun. Everything was in good fun, and overall, the fans had a great time. The alumni had a great time, and I hope the Mets make this a regular part of their seasons, because to be able to see these players that you grew up watching and just the good memories that they all bring back when you see them again, especially for you as a participant, it's got to be like an event that you look forward to doing more of in the future with the Mets.
John, there's a guy that lives up near you, Mike Baxter, who came back, and made a great catch. It made a great catch in Johan's no hitter. He said after the game was over, he said, he can't believe he was part of, these guys that come back. He said, my career wasn't real long and even in New York. And I said, well, Mike, anybody who, I said, of all the millions of people who tried to get to the big leagues and you finally got there, your career is worth everything that you ever get, because it's a tough road. And I said, you were part of one of the greatest things that has ever happened to the New York Mets, so you deserve to be here. And he said, well, thanks for that. But he said, I look around this room and I said, guess what? You belong in this room. So it was, those guys today, they just, they marvel at the guys that they're hanging with it because, but they don't even think they were a part of that. And Mike was.
Yeah, the fans remember, and everybody remembers a good memory, whether it's Ende Chavez making that unbelievable catch in the NLCS in 2016 or Baxter's catch in the no-hitter game. And the fans remember, and they want to pay tribute, and they want to see these guys. And so it's great that the Mets included a wide variety of different guys, and whatever their level was, they were there. They all got to participate. I did hear from Addison Reed as well, who actually sent a message to you that I gave him your email address, because he said he had such a wonderful time, and he was so excited, and he just wanted to reach out to you and thank you. So he sent a message on one of your social media pages, and I said, well, here, reach out to Terry directly. Here you go. But just the fact that these guys were all so happy to be there, and it was a really cool event. It really was.
Yep.
Always great talking with Terry, and that was a great Alumni Classic. I'm glad we got to talk to him about it right here on the show. And now it's time for another weekly Tunnel of Towers feature highlighting a hero or celebrity and their T2T story. So let's go to that right now.
My name's Steven Kubrick. I wrestle as Steve Macklin in TNA. My character that I portray is a clash between Captain America and the Punisher. Get to be a big kid in my underwear every day. So I grew up in Rutherford, New Jersey, which is right outside the city, and Skyline is right there. And then 9/11 happened. That morning, you could just see outside of our window, just the smoke still billowing from where the towers were. We felt attacked. And I think at that moment, I made my choice knowing the route that I needed to go. I was in the United States Marine Corps 4 years. Both my deployments were to Afghanistan. Adapting back to civilian life, I've watched as a lot of my friends have struggled, whether it's drugs, suicide, and then life outside of the military, not being able to find something like I did with wrestling. Attaching yourself to something that's very similar to what the Marine Corps was. The guys that you serve with, to me, have always been the guys that I go to if I have a problem. We were in the trenches together, and we learned that together, and we fought that together, and now we're coming back, and they're the only ones that can relate to that. We just keep in touch. T2T is helping thousands of veterans, and the number just keeps growing. And the $11 a month that you see on those ads, it goes a long way. For a homeless vet to have the resources where they're at, and for Tunnels to Towers to do that, it helps veterans get back to real life and civilian life, whether it's smart homes, helping out with mortgages, or just getting back to normal life with recovery and becoming back to civilian world. It's good to know that people care. Americans shouldn't stand for their heroes sleeping on the streets. Across this great country, there are thousands of veterans with no place to call home. They deserve better. The Tunnel to Towers Foundation is committed to eradicating veteran homelessness by providing housing and critical services. So please help by donating $11 a month at t2t.org. The Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Let us do good.
Well, Terry, it's we don't have too many more to go. We have, we're winding down the baseball season. We certainly hope for October baseball, but once again, it's been just wonderful, being able to talk baseball with you. And I know hopefully we'll have a little bit more to go, but another good show today.
John, I thought it was a real good show. I love talking with Andy, talking baseball. We do it so much when I'm in New York with SNY and stuff. So, but you know what? I truly believe there's going to be October baseball in New York, and the Mets are going to be a part of it. And as we've said so many times, I'm going to tell you what, if they're in it, that means they played pretty good at the end, and that's how you want to get into the postseason, playing good. So it should be a lot of fun.
Yes, it will. Well, you got to believe, as Tug McGraw once said famously in 1973, and all of us here also say the same thing, you got to believe. Terry Collins, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you real soon. By this time next week, the Mets' regular season will be over, and they'll be either in the postseason or heading home for the winter. We will cover it all right here on the next Terry Collins Show. And before we go, we'd like to remind you to check out Amazing Conversations with Jay Horowitz, a New York Mets podcast hosted by the foremost Mets historian. Each and every week, Jay brings on guests from all eras in Mets history. Conversations with Jay Horowitz, available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. And you can subscribe to the Terry Collins Show on your favorite podcast platform or on our own YouTube channel. Just hit subscribe on the platform of your choice. And for our YouTube viewers, our entire archives of the past 2 seasons are available, including full episodes, interviews, and highlights from each show. You can go check out. Just go to youtube.com/The Terry Collins Show. And that'll wrap up this edition of the program. Thanks to our creative director, Marsh, and to our researcher, Dominic DiBiase. For Terry Collins, this is John Arezzi. We'll see you next time.